Tonight, on First at 9 this Wednesday, the 6th of August 2025. IGP removed. President Anura Disanayake approves parliamentary resolution to remove IGP Deshabandhu Tennakon. Electricity Amendment. Sri Lanka's Electricity Amendment Bill passed with a majority vote and key changes. Tracking corruption. Former State Minister Shashindra Rajapaksa remanded over illegal acquisition of compensation and misappropriation of state land.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, you're joining First at 9, brought to you by Sri Lanka's most trusted news source, Derana. I'm Tharindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. In your top story this evening, President Anura Disanayake has approved the parliamentary resolution to remove Deshabandhu Tennakon from the position of Inspector General of Police. This will be the first time in Sri Lanka's history a sitting IGP has been removed through a parliamentary motion.
Suspended Inspector General of Police Deshabandhu Tennakon, who was placed under remand custody of the shooting which took place near the W15 hotel in Waligama, Matara on December 31, 2023, was later granted bail. In light of multiple allegations of misconduct brought against Tennakon, the Speaker of Parliament appointed a special 3-member committee to examine the charges and consider his removal from the post of IGP. The committee concluded its inquiry and officially submitted its findings to the Speaker on the 22nd of July. The report held Tennakon accountable for misconduct and firmly recommended his dismissal from office. Yesterday, Parliament debated the motion to remove Tennakon from the position of IGP, and in the subsequent vote, the motion was carried with 177 votes in favour. The resolution was subsequently forwarded to President Anura Disanayake, and the head of state has provided his approval for Tennakon's removal from the position of IGP. According to Secretary to the Ministry of Public Security, Ravi Seniratne, the relevant document has been hand-delivered to Deshabandhu Tennakon's residence by ministry officials. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church commended Deshabandhu Tennakon's removal from the post of IGP as a landmark decision that says the President that all citizens are equal before the law regardless of rank or position.
A charge sheet was brought against Deshabandhu Tennakon and a committee was appointed to investigate those charges. This committee submitted a report to Parliament in which Tennakon was found guilty of most of the charges against him. The next step was for Parliament to adopt the resolution for his dismissal with a majority vote. That provision was followed yesterday. In my opinion, the rule of law should definitely be established. This is a good opportunity to establish the President that the law applies equally to everyone. This President should continue. If government officials, politicians or anyone else has committed an offence, they should be brought before the law. Treasury Secretary Dr. Harshana Surya Peruma claims that despite the reduction in US tariffs, Sri Lanka will continue to engage in discussions with US trade officials to maximize benefits for the country's exporters. Speaking at a discussion with exporters on US tariffs today, the Treasury Secretary further noted that this situation should be viewed as an opportunity rather than a setback in order to elevate the country to the next level amid its post-crisis economic recovery. A meeting was held in Colombo today with the participation of the Ministry of Finance, the Sri Lanka Export Development Board and exporters to discuss the newly imposed US reciprocal tariffs. The meeting focused on measures and plans to be implemented in response to the new tariffs.
The objective that we chased, we were very clear, very focused as to what we need. It is to secure the competitive advantage we needed as a country. So we were very focused on that. The most important stakeholders in this conversation is you. What we can do to safeguard your interest as exporters. After seeing that presentation with a lot of facts, the next word that we need to talk about is opportunity. How are we going to capitalize on this opportunity that is ahead of us? And we are continuing to engage with the teams or with our counterparts. It's a journey. It's not a single destination. It's a journey. So we believe with the input of you all, we should be able to get the best outcome for the country to elevate the society from where we are to the next level. When I see some of those numbers, we should be able to get more dollars into the country.
ඉතින් සියලුම අපනයන කරුණාට සෑහීමකටපත් වුණා. ඒ වගේම එතුමාලා ඉල්ලා සිටියා තවදුරටත් රජයට මේ අපනයනයට තියෙන වාසි වැඩි කරන්නත් තීරුබද්ධ තවදුරටත් අඩු කර ගැනීමටත් උත්සාහ කරන්න කියන එකත්
හොඳම ෆෝන් එකක් ගන්න. ළඟම බාන්ස් එකට යන්න.
Japanese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Akio Isamata, commends the socio-economic transformation instituted by the new Sri Lankan government as a vital step in rebuilding the confidence of Japanese investors in Sri Lanka, which was eroded over the past few years. Speaking at the annual general meeting of the Sri Lanka-Japan Business Council, the Japanese ambassador invited President Anura Dissanayake to undertake a visit to Japan to further strengthen Japan-Sri Lanka ties. The 46th annual general meeting of the Sri Lanka-Japan Business Council was held yesterday in Colombo with Ambassador of Japan and patron of the council Akio Isamata in attendance. Following the conclusion of Mahen Karyavasan's tenure as the council's president, former Vice President Athule Dirisinghe was elected the new president.
President Trump, the reciprocal tariffs. Amid these difficult situations, what is important is strategic partnership between friendly countries. Under the new president and the new government, the whole world is observing big socio-economic and political changes happening here in Sri Lanka. We are seeing the restoration of eroded social fabric of this country. What is most important at this juncture is to regain the confidence of Japanese people and Japanese investors in Sri Lanka. Because of what we have seen for the past several years, Japanese people's interest in Sri Lanka was naturally reduced. We should let the Japanese people and Japanese investors know more about the big change that is happening here in this country. We like to see concrete efforts are being made for the improvement of business environment here in Sri Lanka. We are starting a kind of technical level working group between Japanese stakeholders and Sri Lankan stakeholders to work out solutions to the problems that Japanese companies operating here in Sri Lanka are facing right now. We like to see that mega projects like BIA are steadily implemented. This is the most convincing proof that Sri Lanka is changing. We like to see more efforts being made to promote Sri Lanka in Japan. So many untapped resources in Sri Lanka, minerals and people. There are a lot of opportunities ahead for manufacturing. Trilateral cooperation, Japan, South India and Sri Lanka. Expo is being held in Japan, Osaka, Kansai. We can make the best use of this expo to promote Sri Lanka. If the president of Sri Lanka makes a visit sometime this year, that will be another great opportunity to boost our bilateral relations.
The Colombo Chief Magistrates Court today ordered that former State Minister of Agriculture Shashindra Rajapaksa be remanded until August 19th following his arrest by the Bribery Commission. Rajapaksa's arrest is linked to allegations that he pressured government officials to secure compensation for an unauthorized structure built on state-owned land in Sevenagala, which was damaged during the public unrest in 2022. Former State Minister of Agriculture Shashindra Rajapaksa was arrested by officials of the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery and corruption this morning. The arrest was in connection with an incident where the former State Minister had allegedly obtained compensation for a building constructed illegally on a plot of state-owned land in Kiribanvava, Sevenagala, which was set ablaze during the 2022 island-wide protests by threatening state officials. Rajapaksa, who was brought before the Bribery Commission for interrogation, was subsequently presented before the Colombo Chief Magistrates Court. During proceedings, Chief Inspector AHMG Abe Singha, who represented the Bribery Commission, outlined the findings of the investigation. Presenting key evidence, Abe Singha said the building in question stood on a government land in Sevenagala under the jurisdiction of the Mahaweli Authority. No private party had been granted a legal license for its use. Despite this, the suspect had unlawfully constructed a building on the site and operated a political office, which was later destroyed during the mass protests on May 9, 2022. He disclosed that the suspect had submitted a claim for compensation, but under the name of a third party, Manoj Ekanayaka. The Compensation Office rejected this request twice, citing the state ownership of the land. Subsequently, the suspect is alleged to have exploited his official influence to pressure certain officials of both the Compensation Office and the Mahaweli Authority. Eventually, 8.85 million rupees in compensation was approved in the name of Ekanayaka, who later admitted in his statement that he transferred the funds to the suspect on 2 separate occasions. Assistant Director of the Bribery Commission, Attorney at Law Sulochana Hettiarachchi, informed the court that the commission would formally bring charges against Rajapaksa under the Bribery Act for corruption and under the Public Property Act for the alleged misuse of government assets. She requested that the suspect be remanded until the conclusion of the legal proceedings. In response, President's counsel Anil Silva, appearing for the defence, moved for bail on his client. After reviewing these submissions, Colombo Chief Magistrate Tanuja Lakmali denied bail and ordered that Shashindra Rajapaksa be held in remand custody until August 19th. In a separate development, former Minister Sagala Ratnayaka, who served as Chief of Staff to former President Ranil Wickremesinghe, appeared before the Illegal Assets Investigation Division earlier today. His appearance was in connection with an inquiry into the alleged accumulation of wealth through political means. Meanwhile, in Parliament today, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya commented on the series of arrests carried out over the past year and into this year in connection with allegations of bribery and corruption.
As of the end of 2024, a total of 86 individuals had been arrested in connection with bribery and corruption cases. This includes 34 individuals apprehended for bribery and 29 others for corruption-related offences. Among them were 7 politicians and 58 former state officials. Additionally, 28 civilians were arrested during the same year over allegations of bribery. As of June 30th, 2025, 42 more arrests have been made, 28 on bribery charges and 14 on corruption charges. These figures include 9 civilians, 6 of whom were involved in bribery cases and 3 in corruption cases. Notably, 5 relatives of politicians have also been arrested for bribery within this period. These developments bring the total number of arrests in just the first 6 months of this year to 63.
දේශපාලන ශේෂ්ත්‍රය තුලින් මේ දූෂිත මානසිකත්වයක් ඇති වෙන තත්වය වෙනස් කිරීම සඳහා ඔබතුමිය ගනු ලබන කඩිනම් ක්‍රියාමාර්ග තිබෙනවාද?
The people have already made their decision. The public has decisively turned away from the corrupt political culture that once plagued our nation. What we are witnessing today are the final remnants of that old decaying order. As with all remnants of a broken system, this too shall pass.
The Sri Lanka Electricity Amendment Bill was passed in Parliament today with a majority vote along with amendments. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, responding to a question raised by Sri Lanka Podujana Perapuna MP D.V. Chanaka, clarified that the government has not incurred any expenses related to the satellite project involving a son of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa. She further stated that the project has in fact generated revenue for the country.
Back in 2011 to 2012, the company Supreme SAT, which is affiliated with Supreme Global Holdings, signed an agreement with the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka on May 23, 2012 to launch a communication satellite. Between 2013 and 2014, the company spent over 12 million rupees on the satellite project. According to the project proposal submitted by the company, the Sri Lankan government did not invest any funds in this project.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for giving a clear response today to a question that has been raised by many investors. I believe most Sri Lankans know this case as Chichi's rocket. It was widely claimed that $300 million were invested in this project and that the money had disappeared. In fact, on the day I raised the question, Minister Bima Ratnayaka also said that it had vanished. But now the Prime Minister herself has clarified that no such thing happened. Not a single Sri Lankan rupee was invested in the project, and in fact, it has generated a direct income for the country annually. For the sake of national security, as a government, we are committed to safeguarding key parts of the electricity and energy sectors. That is our mission. Over the past 10 months, we have demonstrated how to attract investment without selling off the valuable assets that belong to our people. In 2001, when there was a UNP government, Ranil Wickremesinghe and Karu Jayasuriya as the Minister of Energy presented a favourable draft bill that that is still believed to be the best draft by any expert to date. But the JVP protested and sent that government home.
අන්තිමට ආණ්ඩුවත් ගෙදර යවුවා. කලින් කතා කරපු මන්ත්‍රීතුමත් කිව්වා අපි පෞද්ගලීකරණයට විරුද්ධව විරුද්ධයි. එදත් විරුද්ධයි අදත් විරුද්ධයි. හැබැයි අපි කිසිසේත්ම විවිධ අවශ්‍යතාවය පරිදි පෞද්ගලික ව්‍යවසායකත්වයට කැඳවන එකට අපි විරුද්ධ නැහැ. සාස්දනවි ව්‍යාපෘතිය.
The 300 megawatt Sasdanwe project was approved on the 31st of January 2025 by the current government, but the project was approved based on fabricated data. It is stated that the cost of generation per unit is 20 rupees and 15 cents, but the calculation was done by considering the price of a litre of diesel to be 110 rupees and the exchange rate of US dollars to be 195 rupees. In April, the Electricity Board and the LTL signed the power purchase agreement for the Suhasdanwe power plant. The loss incurred by the country is 73 billion rupees. The opposition leader is referring to variables used in the tender called in 2021. Those variables are no longer applicable today. Therefore, do not come to Parliament repeating falsehoods spread by former MPs like Gamampila. It isn't suitable for you. The citizens of this country are still wondering where they find some relief. I was listening to the minister's speech this morning, hoping to hear an announcement about reducing electricity tariffs. If you had made such a statement, you would have been celebrated. At a time when ministers are losing public approval, it is important to have some who are commended. Perhaps you are also aiming for that recognition. However, what we are witnessing is that the promises made while in opposition are no longer the reality when in government. The government came to power pledging to repeal the amendments introduced by the previous administration. However, after realizing they could not fully discard them, they presented an amendment that is only slightly different from the previous version. You previously claimed there was a hole in the Umaoya project and protested against it. You also opposed the Norechole power plant, and under the Good Governance administration, that project was suspended through a deal. These current amendments are no different from the earlier ones. Read them and see. Only the cover has changed. What did we say before coming into power? We said we would reduce electricity tariffs by 1/3 within 3 years. As the MP before me mentioned, this cannot be done overnight. It was attempted in the past, but now the Ceylon Electricity Board is bearing the cost of those decisions. As a political party, we opposed the Umaoya project and we had valid reasons. It is not as though you are unaware. The Supreme Court, in its verdicts on this case, stated that about 13,000 houses were damaged because of the Umaoya project and nearly 7,000 springs dried up. We were never against the country's development. We opposed the harm it caused. I urge the public to understand the opposition's current protest. This is the frustration they carry. They see the country progressing and that causes them discomfort. In the vote following the second reading debate on the Sri Lanka Electricity Amendment Bill, 121 votes were cast in favour and 25 votes against. The bill presented for its third reading was subsequently passed with amendments.
පනත් කෙටුම්පත කාරක සභාවේදී සලකා බලා සංශෝධන සහිතව සම්මත කරන ලද බව දන්වනු කැමැත්තෙමි.
Youth activists protested today against alleged political interference by the National People's Power in the formation of youth associations under the National Youth Services Council. A protest march began at around 3:30 p.m. from Navinna, bound for the Youth Services Council in Maharagama. Protesters called for an immediate end to the NPP's interference. Tensions rose when Samagi Jana Balavege's Charit Abesinghe addressed the media and was met with resistance from demonstrators. The protesters, who had been protesting for nearly an hour and a half, later dispersed. Welcome back. Israeli airline Arkia has announced plans to resume service to Sri Lanka starting September 2025. Arkia, one of the largest airlines in Israel, previously operated direct flights to and from Colombo until May 2024. The airline is scheduled to resume services on September 23, 2025, with its Tel Aviv-Colombo route operated by Gulliver's Airbus A330-200 aircraft. For the remainder of the summer season, Arkia will operate one flight per week on this route. The Colombo bourse closed in green today as a result of price losses in counters such as Melster Corp, People's Insurance and Carson Cumberbatch. The all-share price index climbed 0.44% to close at 19,804.8, while the more liquid Sri Lanka S&P SL 20 continued to end at 0.04% lower at 5,827.85. Market turnover crossed 4.4 billion rupees. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreign investors closing as net buyers, purchasing shares worth 9 million rupees. Up next, we have Sarah Rafayadin from Capital Alliance in our next segment, Economic Outlook.
Construction activity expanded month on month in June as indicated by the PMI. Crude oil prices rose during 28 July to 1st August on supply concerns from Russia and Ukraine conflict, with Brent and WTI gaining USD 3.85 per barrel and USD 3.89 per barrel respectively before stabilizing on tariff-related market reassessments. The AWPR fell 3 basis points to 8.07%, while the AWCMR held steady at 7.84%. Reserve money declined on lower commercial bank deposit at CVSL, and the liquidity surplus narrowed to 76.29 billion rupees from 93.89 billion rupees. Equity indices gained, with the ASPI and the S&P SL20 up by 2.29 and 2.43% respectively. Government security yields were broadly stable, with T-bills and T-bond auctions oversubscribed by 2.1 and 1.7. Foreign holdings in government securities rose 2%, while secondary market turnover fell by 7.4% week on week. Gross official reserves stood at USD 6.08 billion at the end of June, including the PBOC swap. Trade deficit widened to 3.27 billion USD in the first half of 2025 versus USD 2.54 billion in the first half of 2024, with exports up by 5.7% year on year to 6.49 billion USD and imports up by 12.4% year on year to 9.76 billion USD. Terms of trade improved 1% year on year to 95.1 points in June.
In international economic developments, the White House announced today that it is imposing an additional 25% tariff on India, bringing total levies against the major United States trading partner to 50%. In an executive order, US President Donald Trump stated that the government of India is currently directly or indirectly importing oil from the Russian Federation. Therefore, he added that consistent with applicable law, articles imported from India into the customs territory of the United States will be subjected to an additional ad valorem duty of 25%. According to the order, the new tariffs are set to take effect in 21 days. Trump's new tariff rate on India now ranks amongst the highest imposed on any of the United States trading partners. Last week, Trump had said that India would pay a 25% tariff in addition to a penalty over its purchase of military equipment and energy from Russia. At the time, it was unclear what form this penalty would take. However, yesterday, Trump signaled that he would substantially raise tariffs on India within 24 hours due to its continued purchase of Russian oil and fueling of the Russian war machine. That's all for tonight from First at 9. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.